have a good day to all of us. By the way, I am Cathyrine Tampos, and this report is all about the literary criticism in English 304. And this activity is respectfully submitted to Miss Azucena H. Haya. And my assigned novel is all about The Last of Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. So let's go on further about this novel. So the theory I choose is the feminism criticism in 1960s to the present. So number one question is, how is the relationship between men and women portrayed? So specifically happened this in 1757. We shall focus on the two main women characters. The two women in the story were Cora and Alice. Both have different personalities, but nevertheless, both portray the status and role of women in those times. Cora is the older of two sisters. She was a mixed racial heritage, different from her half-sister. Alice, her mother, is a descendant of West Indies slaves, and her father is a Scotist. She was brave, though her courage was restrained because women were damp, weak, soft, and unable to protect themselves in those times. And women during this time were treated as damsels in distress, with no capability whatsoever of standing on their own, of defending or protecting themselves. In the novel, however, there were instances when Cora subtly used her femininity or sexuality as a factor in getting what she wanted. There were times when the desires of the men were highlighted. This somehow reflects the treatment of women as sex objects or objects of desire. So, the main character were men, and the plot revolves around saving women who were kidnapped in the course of the effort to save the women. Battles were fought and relationships were formed and destroyed in the novel. Women were used as a means to make the men more interesting. They were treated as objects, wrought upon and desired by men. They were regarded as one of the reasons for battle, and the same a reward once a battle has been won. So, number two, what are the power relationships between men and women, or characters assuming male or female roles? How are male and female roles defined? So, gender power relations imply a conventional approach of males having a superior advantage over females in a workplace environment due to more senior positions held by males. Women had no opinion and voice in society. They were considered soft and unassuming and very forgiving. They were submissive to their fathers and husbands. The Last of the Mohicans also takes up different understandings of the role of men and women in European and native societies, Cora, and to a lesser extent, Alice. As a three-dimensional character, one possessed of courage and ingenuity in the face of danger, but the demands placed on her life are those typical of 18th century woman. So, generally speaking, both British and French forces believe that war is to be fought by men among men, and that women and children should not be involved in battle in any way. Thus, Edward conveys Cora and Alice from Fort Edward to Fort William Henry at the start of the novel, hoping to keep them out of harm's way. But Native American customs regarding the involvement of women in a battle are different in two ways. First, women in native cultures participate more openly and centrally in the rituals that precede battles and in preparations for warriors, and women are treated in Fenimore Cooper's rendering of native customs as reasonable targets for battles, especially as regards the capture of women and the holding of them for ransom. So, number 3 questions is, What constitutes masculinity and femininity? So, masculinity is seen to be the trait which embodies ambitions, acquisitions of wealth, and differentiated gender roles. Femininity is seen to be trait which stress caring and nurturing behaviors, sex quality, equality, environment, awareness, and more fluid gender roles, where masculinity and femininity refer to an individual's gender in terms of maleness and femaleness, respectively. Gender roles are those socially ascribed normative behaviors with respect to a given gender. So that's are the constitutes about masculinity and femininity. So number 4, how do characters embody these traits? So in the Last of Mohicans, most of the males are soldiers and warriors, with the exceptions of David Gamut, a minister. Men are expected to risk death in order to protect women from harm. This is true of both white and indigenous men. Duncan Hayward and Hauke Onkas or Chigangok and even David Gamut all put their lives at risk in order to save Cora and Alice. Males are also the source of violence and dangers, both white and indigenous. The French soldiers slaughters the British people who are trying to flee Fort William Henry, including women and children. Mangwa poses a trait to Cora by capturing her and attempting to force her into marriage. Cora is killed by Horon man. So, Alice is depicted as stereotypical women were seen in the era. She cries easily and is distraught by her circumstances. She does nothing to fight back against her captors. Cora, on the other hand, is depicted as cool-headed. She is source of comfort for Alice. Cora fights back in her own way by leading a trail of broken twigs after she and Alice are captured so that Hayward, Hauke, and Onkas can find them. Cora also steadfastly refuses a forced marriage, showing courage. So number 5, do characters takes on traits from opposite genders? How so? How does this change other reactions to them? What does the work reveal about the operations, economically, politically, socially, or psychologically of patriarchy? So, for me, yes, the characters take on traits from opposite genders. All of Copper's personages, while they generally act in keeping with their characters, are primarily static. Reasons for this may be found in the influence of the sentimental novel and in Copper's concepts of place. But these characterizations may also be part of a bigger plan, though Copper may have felt rather than known the plan. So, these static characters functions within a total situation that is one of the dynamic change. They are caught in something for larger than themselves as a group or as individuals or socially. The frontiers conflicts are born of a more encompassing continental movements which projects its dynamisms with additional strength simply because it rests in a subtle contrast to the outwardly active but inwardly static characters. They are static as individuals, active as parts of a dynamic whole. So, number 6, what does the work imply about possibilities of sisterhood as a mode of resisting patriarch? But does the work say about women's creativity? So, The Last of the Mohicans is about two sisters, Cora and Alice Monroe, who had recently arrived in the American colonies. They need an escort to take them to their father, Colonel Monroe, a commander of a Fort William Henry. Fort William Henry is subsequently attacked by the French. Cora and Alice escape escorted by our young British officer Duncan Hayward. In order to survive in the wilderness, they must trust their lives to Hauki, an American frontiersman, and these two close friends, Onkas and Jigangok, the last two surviving members of the Mohican tribes of indigenous people. So, Colonel Monroe's two daughters, Cora and Alice, who are at Fort Edward, plan to make the journey to Fort William Henry to join their father. They began their trip escorted by Major Duncan Hayward, David Gamot, and Mangwa, a native scout from the Huron tribe. On their travels, they encountered native Bampu called Hauki, and his two friends, Onkas and Jingangok, who are the last remaining members of the Mohican tribe. The parties joined and began traveling together. Cora and Onkas are drawn to one another romantically. So, number 7. What does the history of the work's reception by the public and by the critics tell us about the operation of patriarch? So, feminism criticisms roots are in a woman's social, political, economic, and psychological operation. By seeking to view women in a new perspective and discovered women's contributions to literary history, feminism's criticisms aims to reinterpret the old text and establish the importance of women's writing to save it from being lost or ignored in the male-dominated world. It also seeks to establish females' perspective as being of equal importance relative to male perspective. So, feminism criticisms concerns itself with stereotypical representations of genders. Thus, although there are many ideas that can be considered through feminism lens, feminism criticism is primarily concerned with a few ideas and issues that help feminism critics examine genders, politics in works, trace the subtle constructions of masculinity and femininity, and understand gender politics within literary works. So, another one is feminism critics argue that women's oppression has gone or foraged in patriarchal cultures. In this view, women's oppression has social, economic, political, and psychological aspects and is tied directly to traditional system of male dominance and at the head of family. Patriarchal family structures are represented in nearly all cultures, all literary works. So, the last questions is number 8. So, what role the work play in terms of women's literary history and literary tradition? So, for me, women's literature has often been defined by publishers as category of writing done by women. Though obviously this is true, many scholars find such as definition reductive. What makes the history of women's writing so interesting is that in many ways, it is a new idea of study. The traditional of women writing has been much ignored due to the inferior position women have held in male-dominated societies. It is still not unheard of to see literature classes or anthologies in which women are greatly outnumbered by male writers or even entirely absent. So, the onus of women's literature then is to categorize and create an area of study for a group of people marginalized by history and to explore through their writing their lives as they were while occupying such as unique socio-political space within their culture. So, female literary tradition for a corpus of writings written by women from a certain period, as A. Showalter in her literature of one's own shows, or for the writings which had been common traits. So, in other words, is feminism literary critic resist traditional assumptions while reading. In addition to challenging assumptions which were thought to be universal feminist, literary criticism actively supports including women's knowledge in literature and valuing women's experiences. So, that's all of
Ngày
my
vô nhà thương, ngày vô nhà thương, ngày vô nhà anh biết thương. Giây phút em gặp anh là em biết